Hi, I'm Chris McBrien, a Gen Xer, and the pop culture from my generation is awesome.
And I'm Yancy Eaton, a millennial, and the pop culture from my generation is dope.
Episode 47, Childhood Celebrity Crushes. Hey, Chris McBrien here. That is Yancy Eaton, and this is Pop Goes Your World. Before we get started, don't forget, we got to get over to podcastawards.com. If you can, you got until the end of the month, so you got until July 31st, 2017. Get over to podcastawards.com and cast your ballot for your nominations in multiple different categories. And while you're there, while you're nominating all your favorite podcasts, when you're in the entertainment category, it's actually the Rob Has a Podcast entertainment category, please think about nominating Pop Goes Your World. We're in the drop-down menu for that category, so just take 30 seconds, nominate us for a podcast award. We'd certainly really appreciate that. Yancy, what's going on in South Florida today, my friend?
The huge. It is extremely hot inside my shed as I'm recording. Like, I'm literally just drenched in sweat, and I just got inside here. It's so hot. This weather is so terrible. I'm telling you guys, like, I've lived in Florida my whole life, and Florida is incredibly overrated. If you guys want the sunshine or you want the beach, go to California, go to the Carolinas, go anywhere else. The humidity here is just... I mean, it sucks. It is an absolute deal breaker when it comes to living in South Florida. It's terrible, but I'm pretty good. My work schedule's been really crazy, but I'm pretty excited because we actually do have a guest tonight. I know you're going to bring her in, but
yes.
Notice I said her,
yes.
And I also think that this is her podcast debut, her official podcast debut. I'm not 100% sure, so why don't you bring her in?
I will. So this week we decided to do something a little bit different in terms of our topic. So we wanted to do childhood celebrity crushes because we figure, hey, you know what? Growing up, whether you grew up, as a Gen Xer like I did, like in the 70s and 80s, or like you growing up in the 2000s, when you're younger, you have crushes on celebrities. It just happens. So we wanted to kind of run down what our favorite ones are. But we thought to balance things out, what would be better than to bring on a female perspective? And we just kind of give a new thing to the show. So we decided to reach out to Danielle Salinger. And Danielle Salinger, you might know her from Twitter. She's at MRS Salinger. That's Mrs. D. Salinger. And she's, of course, married to our very good buddy, Justin Mason, from the Friends with Fantasy Benefits podcast. So we had to reach out to her. Danielle, thank you very much for joining us. And is Yancy right? Is this your first podcast ever?
Yes, he is. He's absolutely right. This is the first podcast I have ever participated in. And I'm very excited because I am a huge fan of your guys' show.
Oh, thanks. So I'm just curious, not to disclose anything. If you're not comfortable with this, I know I could get in trouble asking this question. But if you're not, you don't have to tell us age or, where do you fall in the spectrum between me and Yancy? Will you at least disclose that just so we know where you're coming from?
You know what? I have no problem. I was born in 76, so I am 40 years old currently. So I'm kind of right in between you guys, a little bit closer to you, Chris, than I am to Yancy, but still in that in-between area.
So I think that perspective, the fact that you're kind of in between our ages, and obviously the fact that you're female, this is going to be just add a new dimension to the show in terms of talking about our favorite celebrity crushes. So are we all ready to get started?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I'm ready.
All right, let's hit it. And everyone knows how much I love Fonzie.
I don't know if you've seen any of the Sharknado movies.
Shatner and Takei are going to be there.
I cannot believe that this is actually possible.
The Star Wars prequels were awful.
Young Doctors in Love.
Young Doctors in Love. Bad CGI kind of starts and ends with George Lucas.
Some of the worst CGI I have ever seen in my entire life.
He ruined the whole original trilogy by superimposing Hayden Christensen over Sebastian Shaw at the end of Jedi. Okay, so here we go. We're going to run down our top 5 celebrity crushes that we had as we were growing up as kids. And I'm going to throw things over to our guests first of all. So Danielle, why don't you take us away? Let's start. We're going to go from number 5 and then work up to 4, 3, 2, 1 from there. So starting with your number 5, who's your number 5 childhood celebrity crush, please?
Okay, I have to say, I thought this was going to be really easy. And then when I started making a list, I realized that I was a little boy crazy when I was younger. So I tried to focus on the boys that I crushed on in my youth when my thoughts were a little bit more sweet and innocent and had yet to venture into anything impure. So,
good approach.
For my number 5... I don't know many girls my age that didn't have a crush on Michael Schofling. He had a relatively short career.
Who?
It really only included one well-known role. but it was an amazing role. He played Jake in 16 Candles.
Oh, yes. Oh, good one.
So, he had a career that spanned maybe about a decade, but the rest of the roles really were small. But most girls know Jake from 16 Candles. And what's not to like? He was tall, dark, and handsome. He drove a gorgeous car. He was in touch with his emotions. And most of all, who doesn't want a guy that'll rescue your panties from a nerd? So, Jake is my number 5.
That's a good one. Oh, I like that one a lot. And the thing is, can I throw some trivia at you? We're going to do some trivia at the end of the show. Do you know, I mentioned this on a previous podcast, but do you know who they actually gave that role of Jake Ryan to? Originally, when they were, putting together the actors and they were casting it, they actually gave that role to Viggo Mortensen.
I do remember you mentioning something about that, and I can't imagine him in that role.
Could you imagine? And the only reason they got rid of him was because John Hughes felt that, between scenes and behind the scenes, that he was getting a little bit too frisky with Molly Ringwald. And that was kind of John Hughes's, it was kind of like his muse, her, and he was very protective of her. So he felt things were going a little bit, that Viggo was getting a little bit too aggressive, so he fired him. And he brought in your guy. So just a little piece of trivia. So that's a good one. I like that one. Jake Ryan. Yes. And it's a Gen Xer too. So I like that one. Okay, Yancy, who do you got for your number 5?
So number 5 for me, I think this is going to be a name that most people, as soon as they hear it, they're not going to know exactly who this is, but they might know her from one very, very, I think it's a famous role, but knowing me, knowing that I reference, the same half dozen films all the time, and Chris, it's been well documented on this show, and, Danielle, I know you've heard this too, but The Matrix is my favorite movie of all time. I've watched it probably 100 times. So Fiona Johnson, she is affectionately known as the woman in red in The Matrix. If you go to her IMDb page, she actually has like a really short list of credits. She was in The Matrix in 1999, Star Wars Episode 2 Attack of the Clones in 2002, and Playing the Field in 1998. Those are her only credits as far as IMDb goes. Despite that, like I said, whenever this movie came out, I was 11 years old, and the woman in red was just like the most beautiful, stunning, absolutely captivating woman I have ever seen in my entire life. And, just the fact that she was in my favorite movie, she was only in it for a few seconds, but she just obviously worked the role so well. It kind of stuck with me as like my textbook, like just classically beautiful woman. As I've got older, I kind of have like a different type, which is what my wife is like the fair skin, but like a dark brunette, green eyes. That's kind of like what I look for, in a woman. And like I said, my wife just completely epitomizes all of those features, but she was the first, I think, actual celebrity crush that I had. And I remember I used to look for like posters and stuff, because everybody wants to hang up a poster on their wall, and she was so obscure that even during 1999 and 2000, at the height of The Matrix, like it was impossible to find anything about her. She kind of just drifted away. To be honest with you, I don't even know if she's alive at this point, because she just fell off the face of the earth. But that was the first love for me, was Fiona Johnson, and I'll kind of always remember that.
When you mentioned The Matrix, I thought you were totally going to Carrie Ann Moss. I just thought that's where you were going to go. I did not expect that at all. Wow, that's a good one. Okay, yep. I put, again, as Danielle said, it was really hard to put together a list of 5, no question. And when I look at my 5, I'm telling you, even with Danielle's knowledge of Gen X, certainly, which exceeds yours, Yancy, I bet you any money she doesn't know who 3 of these people are. But anyway, okay, I'm going to start with number 5. So back in 1978, I was 8 years old, and one of my favorite TV shows was Battlestar Galactica. And I used to love watching this. Every Sunday night, I would watch Battlestar Galactica. It was the coolest thing, because I was really into Star Wars and stuff, and I loved that kind of thing. And it was the first time I ever really thought of anything like this. But anyway, the actress's name, her name was Maren Jensen, and she played Athena. And that was Lauren, what's his name? Was Lauren Green's, he was Adama. It was his daughter. And she was like hardly ever in the show. Once in a while, she just would like sit at a computer monitor and just with a little headphone and just like deliver 1 or 2 lines, and like she hardly ever did. But I don't know, for whatever, I just had this major crush on her. I was 8 and it was so innocent, and I just thought it was like my favorite TV show, and I just had the biggest crush on her. But again, like Yancy, like you had said, like I couldn't find it, like I didn't have any pictures of her to put up or anything like that, but I just had this massive crush on her, and I couldn't wait every Sunday, and I always hoped that she'd be in the episode that week, and was always so happy when she'd make an appearance, even as brief as it was. So Maren Jensen made my number 5. That's mine. Okay, so number 4, Danielle, who do you got?
All right, number 4 for me, Johnny Depp. He was on 21 Jump Street from about 87 to 90. So this was about junior high, beginning of high school for me. And 21 Jump Street was must-see TV for me and my friends. Because being in junior high, the world of high school seemed really sophisticated. And Johnny Depp had that great mixture of being a bad boy, but only because he had to play one for his good boy job as an undercover cop. He had the floppy hair, which always did it for me. And I secretly fantasized that he was going to filtrate my school, come in, I'd be able to meet him, in the way the girls fantasize about that sort of thing when they're young. So number 4 for me was definitely Johnny Depp.
Oh, that's a good one. Okay, Yancy, number 4. What do you got?
Question for you, Danielle. Are you still just as attracted to Johnny Depp as you are now? Because I know he's kind of gone off like the crazy bit in the last couple of years. Like, what are your thoughts on him now? Is he still like a classically handsome man, or is he kind of like faded on you?
All right. When it comes to looks, I still think that he is aging well. Even given, his definite hard partying ways, he still has, I don't know, there's just that something that he's always had. Maybe it's still the hair, because he's still got that floppy hair going on. It's just a little bit longer now. But as of recently, with some of the things that have come out in the news, it definitely takes away from the attraction.
I see that. And for the record, I did not realize that 21 Jump Street was like a former thing. I just thought it was like a new movie that came out with Channing Tatum a couple years ago. So.
See, do you see what I got to put up with every week, Danielle?
No. This is what I put up with every day in my life being married to my husband, because my husband and I, there's an 8-year difference between the two of us. And so when we first began dating, he and his friend were talking about Mission Impossible. And I said, "Oh, that was a great show." And the two of them turned to me,
"What?
That was a show? What are you talking about?" And it's just, it's embarrassing. It's horrible. So yes, I understand the frustration.
Okay. Anyway, okay, Yancy, what do you got?
Yeah, I actually didn't know Mission Impossible was the show either, but I digress. So number 4 for me, I think there are millions of beautiful women in the world, right? But I think what sets a person over the top is they have to bring something else to the table, whether it be a man or a woman, right? Being just, objectively handsome or objectively beautiful for a woman is not enough whenever it comes to being a celebrity. Because like I said, there are just, there are millions of people that want to be celebrities or they want to be famous, but, they look good, but they're missing some sort of talent or pizzazz or, stage presence or what have you. For me, I am always especially drawn to musical talent just because I've always put music at such a high level of importance in my life. So whenever I was maybe like a preteen through like my teenage years, and even now, I've always like championed really strong female singers, like, with incredible ranges, and, they have like a, 4-octave just range, and they could sing high, they could sing low, various genres of music. And I think one of the best vocalists of the last 25 years who is starting to get a little bit of publicity as far as like being one of the most heralded singers of our time is Hayley Williams of Paramore. She is an objectively beautiful woman, like I said. She is iconic for constantly dyeing her hair like various shades of orange and bright red. Like always, she was always known for that. Kind of like an alternative look to her, like very like punky, emo. And like I said, she's been the lead singer of Paramore for years and years. Played, she signed to Atlantic, but it's a subsidiary of Fueled by Ramen, which is like this really like indie Warped Tour type of music label. Always done like pop punk music. She always dressed really cool. And like I said, what really set it off for me was the fact that she's just such a phenomenal singer, such beautiful range. She has her hand in most of the songs that they write, so she's also a phenomenal songwriter and just an immensely talented person. Like, not even talking about physical attraction, but have you guys ever noticed, like, throughout the years that you're just drawn to people who are just incredibly good at something? It doesn't even have to be something that is tied to, like, a physical attraction, but just people who are immensely talented, whether it be, like, their job or they're good with communicating with people or anything like that. Like, she's just such a phenomenal singer that I've always kind of held that special place in my heart, like, for her. And, just as an aside, she is interesting looking too, just because she has, like the gap between her teeth, the diastema, for those of you who are like dental enthusiasts. I just thought, I always thought she was like
all those dental enthusiasts out there.
I know we have a huge overlap with the podcast. Yeah.
Oh, our demographics, we really penetrate the dental enthusiast demographic. Oh, yeah.
Yep. For sure. Dentists really high on the list of occupations that listen to the show. But in either way, she's just an objectively beautiful woman. Like I said, incredibly, incredibly talented. I was actually just listening to her newest album today. And she'll always have like special place in my heart just because of just the immense talent that she has as a singer. So Hayley Williams is my number 4.
You made a good point there, and it leads right into my number 4. You made a point that there's tons of beautiful people in the world. That's not what it's about. It's about somebody that
Chris, you co-host with one.
Well, exactly, one of the best. I ride your coattails all the time. And like the thing is that it's not just about someone who is, just gorgeous. It's not about that. They have to have something, just something about them, an intangible thing. And I'll tell you, back in the 80s, okay, girls loved the movie Dirty Dancing, right? Like, they just loved this movie. They loved Patrick Swayze in it. But the thing is, for me, and then also in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, I thought Jennifer Grey was one of the most uniquely beautiful women I'd ever seen in my life. Like, and I was a teenager. I was like, wow, look at her. She's just amazing looking. Like, there was just something about her. And I know she had that kind of big nose, you know what I mean? But I just thought she was just so uniquely looking that I just had a major, major crush on her. And it was years later that she was on Dancing with the Stars. And my wife would watch this stupid Dancing with the Stars show. And she was, oh, we got to watch Dancing with the Stars. I don't want to watch this stupid show. And then I have to watch it. And then like, oh, Jennifer Grey's going to be, I was like, oh my God, Jennifer Grey. I always had a crush on her. Like, I just thought she was great. And then I watched the show and she went and got a nose job. And she looks like a different person. I was like, that's not her. Like, she looks terrible. Like, I mean, I guess you would look at her for first glance on Dancing with the Stars and go, man, that's a beautiful woman. But for me, it was like, why did she do that? Why did she change her appearance like that? That was what made her look so unique, and that was, to me, what was the whole attraction with her in the first place. Was she didn't look like everybody else. She looked just unique, and the fact that she went and got this nose job totally ruined it for me. So she's still my number 4, but she ruined it for me by not only going on Dancing with the Stars, but getting a nose job before she did it. So that's that. All right, number 3, Danielle, what do you got?
Well, and before I get to my number 3,
yes.
I don't know if you know this, but she really struggled, Jennifer Grey, to get roles after that nose job because people no longer recognized her.
She was unrecognizable. You're right. And nobody would cast her because, like, you don't look like Jennifer Grey. We want Jennifer Grey. Who
Absolutely.
are you, right? I agree. I wish she would have kept it.
Well, for my number 3, and it's funny because what you guys are talking about for your number 4s, I take to be kind of that passion that people have for whatever it is that they're doing, whether it's acting or singing or, their job. When somebody has a great passion for something, that's very attractive. So it kind of leads in a little bit to my number 3, which is John Cusack. For a long time, he played these nerdy guys going after the girl. He had a lot of movies where he was doing, he did 16 Candles where he didn't really go after the girl, but he still played the nerdy guy. But
One Crazy Summer. Remember One Crazy Summer?
Exactly. Yeah. The Sure Thing, Better Off Dead, One Crazy Summer, Hot Pursuit, Say Anything, which, Say Anything is a favorite of most girls. But he played these guys that were kind of an anti-leading man. He wasn't the stereotypical guy with the good looks and the smooth moves. He was a scrawny guy, had that nerdy look to him. But he was intelligent, and most of all, he was passionate to the point where he would do whatever it took to get the girl, even holding the boombox up above his head, which I know that most millennials probably don't know what a boombox is. But there was a time when that was the thing to do before you had, a Walkman or anything like that, or iPods nowadays. But John Cusack just had this sweet sort of awkwardness that was very attractive and really endearing, and so he's my number 3.
I like that one. That's a pretty good one. And you speak of, when he did that with In Your Eyes and held up the boombox. That's a major Gen X moment, right? And it was funny because when he was in that movie Say Anything, his co-star, and that was Ione Skye, and she was pretty crush-worthy too, from a guy's perspective.
Oh,
too.
absolutely.
Oh, yeah, I like that. But she didn't do much else after that. That's a good one. I like that one. I had a chance to go and see him speak at Fan Expo last year. He was there with his sister Joan, and they did a session. They did a Q&A session, and I was right there in the front row, and I had a chance to see him talk with. I think he was really, really hungover. But he did a really good thing. It was really good. So, okay. So number 3, Yancy, who do you got?
Number 3 is the textbook Yancy's type. Like I said, all of these, like my top 3 are all kind of like an homage to my wife. I didn't realize 100% that I had a specific type until I met my wife. And then I was like, oh my God, like that is my type. You know what I mean? Like I mentioned, like the fair skin, the fit body, the long dark hair, and the piercing green eyes. That's all of which, my wife has. And I don't know if you guys have ever, seen pictures of my wife on Facebook or Twitter or anything like that, but don't judge my wife's physical appearance by me, because like I am a textbook nerd, like through and through, but my wife is stunningly gorgeous. And this next actress, I think she is the celebrity personification of my wife in real life. And that's Evangeline Lilly of Lost fame. So like I mentioned before, I like characters who kind of bring a little bit more than just being simply beautiful. With her, obviously, she was, I first came to know her from Lost, and I just thought she was just so incredibly beautiful. But she was also a really like strong, just like powerful female lead in that series, and she kind of carried the entire series. She was the driving force. She was the focal point of nearly every single episode. And to be honest with you, she was just kind of a badass, and that's what I like about strong female women like that. Someone who can take care of themselves, and they don't find their validation or their self-worth in what men think of them. And I kind of like, just really gravitated towards her with that. She's also been in like, she was in Ant-Man. She was in the Avengers movie. She was in The Hobbit. And, in The Hobbit, she was like an elf. I thought she just looked stunningly beautiful. She was in The Desolation of Smaug and the second Hobbit as well. She's just, like I said, a phenomenal actor. She's kind of always like flown under the radar. She's never been like a huge star. Her biggest moments were whenever she was in Lost, and then kind of subsided into like the underpinnings of like Hollywood fame. Like she's never really been like a superstar, and to be honest with you, that's kind of how I like it. Like I like my people to kind of fly under the radar, be a little bit low key, and not like the consensus number one most famous actress or anything like that in the world. But I've always just had this like special place in my heart for her. Like I said, just because she always plays these really strong, interesting, really complex characters, and she's the actor personification of my wife. So that's my number 3 is not Kate Beckinsale. Spoiler alert, is Evangeline Lilly.
I wonder who's coming next. And one of the best qualities of Evangeline Lilly, Yancy?
She's Canadian.
Canadian, yes, that's so awesome.
Saskatchewan.
Oh, nice, gotta like it. Okay, so I have a question for you before I go into my number 3. Have either of you? I know this is totally throwing it out there, and totally, I don't know if you can answer this. Have either of you had an opportunity to ever meet in person someone that you had a crush on, a celebrity?
Yes.
Oh wow, who was it?
Oh yes, I got to meet Jason Lee, who. Oh, God, he's been in Mallrats. He's been in a lot of different movies. And I was at a White Stripes concert at the Greek Theater in Berkeley, and he happened to be there. And my older brother, the wonderful man that he is, told Jason Lee that it was my birthday and asked if I could have a kiss, which I received on my hand.
Oh, wow. That was fantastic.
Yeah, it was great.
Is that the guy from the Chipmunks movie? Is that who that is?
Oh yes.
Oh yeah.
I try to watch.
You can call me. My name is Earl or whatever. Yeah. Oh, that's really cool.
My name is Earl. But I enjoyed when he was. He was in a lot of early Kevin Smith movies.
Yes, he was.
And I'm a big fan of the Kevin Smith movies. And so that's when my crush first began for Jason Lee.
Very, very cool. I like that. And Yancy, I guess not. No.
Not like an actual female woman that I found to be physically attractive, but
you did meet Fred Savage once.
Ben Savage. Ben
Savage. Oh,
yes, I did meet him, and I also met Corey Dickerson, like my favorite baseball player.
Yeah, so that's kind of like it. Okay, so back in the 80s, back in 1987, a Canadian show started up. And I'm sure you guys have heard of it because it went on to, a pretty big fame. And it was called Degrassi Junior High. You guys have heard of that show, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was a Canadian. Yancy, any chance you've ever heard of Degrassi? No?
There's a rapper, Drake. He's actually Canadian, too.
Yes.
And he used to be on that show. He played a kid that was wheelchair-bound.
Yeah,
that's the only reason why I know the show. I've never seen it.
Okay, so that was in the new version. That was like in the Next Generation or something like that, I think it was. But when it first started, it was called Degrassi Junior High. And there's actually a street in the east end of Toronto called Degrassi Street. And they made this show, and it was, these kids at Degrassi Street, and it started in 1987, and one of the actresses on that show her name was Stacey Matishan, and she was actually born in the States. I think she was born in Los Angeles, but so anyway, so she comes to Canada, she's doing it, and I just remember watching that show, and I was just crushing on her. huge. She was my age. I was just like, oh my God, I just have the biggest crush on her. I don't know what it was about her. She was beautiful, but it was more that it was kind of vulnerable. I don't know. I just always had this crush on her. So then the cool story is a number of years later, I was like 23 years old and I was doing children's theater in Toronto. And what we did was every week they'd bring in like a quote unquote celebrity actor, to come in and to do a reading with the kids. So we would be on stage and then we would like read a story to the kids. And I never really was like tipped off ahead of time who it was going to be. Like it would just be someone from Second City or like, someone like this and that. And the one time it was the girl from the Northern Pikes video. She ain't pretty. Anyway, long story short. And then one day in walks, they said, okay, well, you're going to do the reading with the kids. And it was Stacey Matician. And I just about fell over. I just couldn't believe that I had the opportunity to get on stage quickly and just do a quick children's reading with Stacey Matician, with my crush. And it was really interesting because backstage, I had a chance to meet her just briefly. We talked a little bit before we went out and then a little bit afterward. And it just struck me how unbelievable. She was just really nice. And so that's always a major thing. When you have like a major crush on somebody and then you meet the celebrity and you find out they're really nice. And the thing that always struck me with her is that she was incredibly shy. And it kind of struck me because I thought for an actress, I expected her to be a little bit more outgoing. She was incredibly shy. She was like her character that she played on Degrassi. She was very, very shy, but it was very cool. So my number 3 crush, I actually got to meet. So it was kind of a cool story. So
hey, Chris, really quickly before we move on.
Yeah.
For those of us Googling along so we can see who these actors and actresses are, how do you spell her last name?
I think it's like Mistysyn.
All right, just because I'm trying to get like an actual picture.
All right,
yeah, that is an objectively beautiful woman.
She is. She's just incredible, right? Like so. Anyway, okay. So number 2, Danielle, take us away.
Okay, I'm glad to know I'm not the only one who's looking up some of these names as we're going along.
I told you wouldn't know who any of mine were.
Actually, I knew who so far 2 of them were. Your first, number 5 and number 4. I know both of them.
You knew Maren Jensen? You knew who Maren Jensen was from Battlestar Galactica, Athena?
I have an older brother who is 5 years older than me. Yes. So I watched a lot of Battlestar Galactica with him. So yes, I am aware. And she, beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
Oh, my goodness.
All right. So moving in to my number 2. I chose my number 2. And I'm going to be a little cheesy here, but nonetheless, I chose him because he's got the right stuff. Before meant anything dirty, that could only mean one thing, which was New Kids on the Block. Oh. I was a huge NKOTB fan back in the day, embarrassingly so. I actually at one point had to force myself to go ahead and get rid of all the T-shirts and everything else that I had because it just was embarrassing. But at the time, I loved New Kids on the Block and I loved Jordan Knight. So Jordan Knight is my number 2. He always seemed like the kind of shy, sweet one to me. And, there's always the stereotypes in a boy band. You've got, the one that's kind of the bad boy. You've got the kind of younger baby-faced one. The one that's a little bit more of the ladies' man. But Jordan Knight always seemed like, the guy that would just take you out on a nice date and really pay attention to you and be very sweet. That may have just been wishful thinking on my part, I'm not sure, but New Kids on the Block, they were actually the first concert that I got to go see for a group that I liked rather than something that my parents were dragging me to go and see. And I remember at the concert all the girls around me screaming and crying and going into hysterics, and I just thought it was ridiculous, so I made sure that all my screaming and crying was kept inside of my head.
That's really cool. And it's funny because those stereotypes that you were talking about, and as they related to boy bands, they actually relate to podcasts as well. Because around here, Yancy is the baby-faced one, and I, of course, am the ladies' man. I'm totally kidding. I'm a total nerd. I'm not the biggest nerd. Okay, Yancy, Mr. Babyface, who do you got for number 2?
All right. So for number 2 for me, 1999 is a recurring theme in this show. I was 11 years old, like I mentioned previously, and there was a movie that came out, and it was the worst of the entire franchise as far as Star Wars goes, and that was Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Oh. However, it did have one super redeeming quality for an 11-year-old Yancy who was discovering girls for the first time, and that was Natalie Portman playing Padme, also Queen Amidala. I think it goes without saying, Natalie Portman is objectively one of the most beautiful women in the world. She played, like I said, like a very beautiful woman who's exactly 8 years older than I am. Her birthday is very close to mine in December, and she's just beautiful, and she played like the love interest, the beautiful eye candy in a Star Wars film. And even though those movies, looking back, were, like I said, the worst of the Star Wars franchise, she played the parts very well. And she did the best that she could with a really flawed script that almost completely sank the entire Star Wars franchise as a whole. And I personally think it was the reason why George Lucas sold off Lucasfilms, just because he couldn't take it anymore. But Natalie Portman, she's still stuck around. She's been Academy nominated multiple times. She's been nominated for over 150 acting awards. She won an Oscar. Her part in Black Swan was absolutely incredible. It's one of my wife and mine favorite movies that we've seen together. She's just, like I said, objectionably beautiful in every possible way. And what's also really draws me to her is the fact that, I don't know if you guys knew this, but like she is like legally like a textbook definition of a genius. Like she's one of the most intelligent people in Hollywood, wickedly intelligent. And I mean, just the fact that, like I said, she is incredibly beautiful, which she has nothing to do with, that's out of her control. But the fact that she is so intelligent and she's so worldly, and all the things that she says, that she puts out, and her comments and her quotes on things is so thoughtful and so thought provoking that she's just, to me, like the total package. She's the type of person where, if I had a daughter, I would want my daughter to want to emulate somebody like her, somebody who is so forward thinking and, just really an independent thinker, and somebody who loves to learn and everything like that. She's just a total package for me. So Natalie Portman, I hemmed and hawed between going back and forth between her and the number one, which I already spoiled. Yep. But she's a very, very close to almost like a 1A or a 1B. But Natalie Portman's my number 2.
Okay, so my number 2, here we go. So last week, Yancy, we were talking about Revenge of the Nerds, and I was saying how back, when I was like 12, 13, 14, at that time in the early 80s, like these R-rated sort of sex comedies were like all the rage, like they were everywhere. And when you're that age, this is where you got a chance to kind of see the world, I guess, for lack of a better term, when you were growing up as a Gen Xer. And so that's kind of where we, were able to see girls, for the first time and kind of experience that. And none was bigger. This is in 1982. This is a defining moment for an entire generation. And if you haven't seen it, Yancy, I'm sure you can find it on YouTube or somewhere like that, somewhere on your smartphone there, young man. You can look it up and find this scene. From the 1982 film Fast Times at Ridgemont High, Phoebe Cates in the red bikini scene coming out of the pool defined an entire generation of young men, and I was one of them because I was caught right in the middle of that time. And I'm not going to say anything more about it. Yancy, just go Google it, find the scene with the red bikini, Phoebe Cates, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and you will know as a 12-year-old boy when this movie came out exactly what kind of effect that scene would have on a human being. That's all I'm going to say about that, and we're going to move on, okay? So we're on. Danielle, you know what scene I'm talking about, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's well worth it. Even as a girl, my jaw dropped. I think that Phoebe Cates and that scene was to boys what Jake leaning against the car in 16 Candles was for girls. Good analogy,
I think, from a Gen X perspective, because I think they're both very, very relevant to Gen X and very, very good. I like that one. That's good. But like I say, anyone that grew up as Gen Xer knows exactly what I'm talking about right there. So let's move on to number 1. Danielle, take us away. Who's your number 1 celebrity crush that you had as a kid?
Okay, my number 1 celebrity crush, and this is an absolute crush for me. I ripped apart Tiger Beat magazines to get his picture up on my wall. Corey Haim.
That was a good one. Yeah, he was huge. Yes,
he was. He was huge. He had that, charming smile. The kind of smile that you would imagine seeing in like a Crest commercial with the little star twinkle coming out the side. He had this charismatic charm. He was fun. He was playful. Although in looking back, as an adult looking back on this, I think some of his charm could come off as smarmy a little bit now, but at least for me at that age, that was just everything that I looked for in a guy. I know that he had a movie called License to Drive that
was
came
the
out
big
in
one.
'88. Yep, that was the big one. And I was 12 years old at the time. So for me, older guy who could drive, which, he couldn't necessarily at that point in the movie, but he did anyways, that just seemed like the epitome of everything I could ever dream for. So Corey Haim was my number one.
And remember, he made those movies with, it was the two Corys. It was Corey Haim and Corey Feldman, License to Drive. That was so funny. And Lost Boys. Oh, man, that was so good. That's a good one.
Oh, yeah, they had quite the bromance going on. I think that back in the day, the two bromances were the two Corys and then Andrew McCarthy and James Spader.
Oh,
those guys were always doing movies together.
Yes, Pretty in Pink. Oh, yeah, that was a good one.
Oh, yeah.
And it's so funny because, you can look back on it with a different perspective when you look at Corey Haim, who's obviously, no longer with us, right? But when he was doing like these reality shows and you kind of saw kind of what he descended into with, substance abuse and stuff like that, it's so terrible. And it was just like he became a bit, almost like a caricature of himself. But it was hard to realize, I think, for millennials to look at him in those reality shows and realize, hey, man, that guy was a major heartthrob for a lot of teenage girls, yourself included.
He was.
Yeah, he was.
He was huge. And I think the sad part of him later in life was that he was still the same guy that he was when I was 12. He really hadn't matured.
Right.
And that was just so hard to see.
Yeah, no, that's a good one.
I choose to remember him as he was in 1988.
And that's one of the key things with Gen Xers I tend to find is we tend to like remember people and moments and movies and scenes and stuff as they were. It's
Absolutely.
like a slice in time. You know what I mean? As I mentioned last week. So okay, Yancy, who do you have? Number one. Well, I think we know this. You've already tipped us off.
Yeah. Very quickly though, I was just Googling Corey Haim because I actually don't know who he is, but you're mentioning, he's no longer with us. But man, this dude. Aside from his extremely questionable, blonde, dyed hairstyles, he seemed to have a really difficult life. I'm reading stuff about him. He was raped as a child. He died broken alone. Really a twisted life. I'm kind of not even knowing anything about him. I actually feel really bad for the guy. But like you said, obviously a very, very handsome dude. But man, he had a difficult go of it.
And even toward the end, Danielle made a good point because at the end he was still that kid from the 80s that wouldn't grow up, because I remember even Corey Feldman had moved on and had a wife and was putting a life together for himself, and Corey Haim was still just himself, the partier. At least that's kind of how things came off. So
yeah, definitely. And now that you've seen what he looks like, Yancy, and you had kind of talked about how some of your picks it's your kind of the type of woman that you look for. Mm-hmm. If you notice, most of the guys that I've picked are that tall, dark, and handsome, and look absolutely nothing like my husband. So I think that Corey Haim is the only one that comes anywhere close, and that's mostly just because of the light-colored hair. So right. I obviously have changed what I go for as I got older.
And that's perfectly okay.
It's okay. Yeah.
Hey man, you certainly
now I go for the big beard. That's
exactly.
What gets me.
Exactly. You certainly didn't settle because Justin's a great guy. Okay, so on to number one. Yancy, what have you got?
Yeah, so number one for me, as mentioned previously, because I am not good at podcasting, number one for me is Kate Beckinsale. So Kate Beckinsale, she's mostly known for her roles in Pearl Harbor, The Aviator with Leonardo DiCaprio. She was in a bunch of movies between 2012 to 2016. What are some other? She was in Whiteout. She was in Nothing But the Truth. Lots of movies, not a lot of big roles. She's not really known as a leading actress. But what I always think of whenever I think of Kate Beckinsale is, aside from the fact that she is just classically beautiful, same description as some of the other actresses that I talked about before. She looks just like my wife. She is very fair skin. She has the long dark hair. She has the green eyes. The really, really just beautiful, infectious smile. You see the woman smile in an interview or laugh or something, and it just automatically just brings out the warmth in you. She has that effect, but whenever I think of her, I think of the roles that she had in Underworld, either Underworld that came out in 2003 or Underworld out of Evolution or Rise of the Lycans, where she basically plays a vampire killer, and she's just completely badass. She's, she's strong, she's powerful, and that's like a recurring theme with me with like these female actresses. I like, women who are strong and they kind of just handle stuff themselves. They're super tough. They bang bang. They shoot guns and stuff like that. They're not afraid to get dirty. They take care of things. They they're not weak. They're not cowering, and they're not waiting around for somebody to save them. And I understand that she's just playing a part, but man, she plays it so well. She plays it tough. She it's an iconic role. I would love to see them kind of like bring back that franchise. Perhaps they will in the next couple of years. But she was just so iconic in it and so strong, and she just has this piercing look, and her physical features play so well to this type of this type of movie, this genre of like the vampire flick. Like I said, like the really light skin, the super dark hair. Like she was born to play like a badass vampire killer. Just it works so well. She's just so incredibly beautiful. She's so lovely. And whenever you hear her accent come out in interviews and stuff, she's just the complete package. I've absolutely loved her forever. And just as really quickly, I don't know if we had the time for this, but I just wanted to throw out a couple honorable mentions very, very quickly.
Sure, go ahead.
So Eliza Dushku and Elijah Cuthbert, both like synonymous with like multiple movies in the late 90s and 2000s. I've also been a huge fan of Jennifer Love Hewitt since the beginning of time. Rachel McAdams, I'm not so much of like a, I don't always like gravitate towards blondes, but she's objectionably beautiful, and she's still
Canadian too.
Yep, also Canadian and making like tons and tons of good movies. Monica Bellucci, she was in The Matrix, The Passion of the Christ. She's again a beautiful woman, but I think this will surprise you guys, and maybe you'll get on board with this too. But before any of these films, like if anybody asked me what the most beautiful woman was, I always remember seeing like a poster or something, like it was like at my uncle's house or my grandfather's like his like garage or something like that. But I've always thought, ever since I knew about women, that one of the most beautiful women to ever grace the face of the earth was Raquel Welch, who obviously dates me like by a lot.
Wow.
I know, but I've always thought, like, if I ever like, Google like the most beautiful woman in the world, like, within a couple of searches, like she always comes up. I think that her face, her body, her whole demeanor, the way she carried herself, just one of the most beautiful women of all time. So I wanted to give her a little bit of a nod. She didn't make my top 5, but like I said, that is a classic textbook beautiful woman. So
look at Yancy giving the props to the old school ones. Good for you.
Yep.
I like it. Okay, so
go ahead. I had a couple of honorable mentions.
Oh, please do. Please mention.
In there if I could. I did it a little bit differently. My honorable mentions are the girl crushes that I had when I was younger.
Very cool. I got to hear this.
For me, Soleil Moon Frye, Elizabeth Shue, Alyssa Milano, Madonna, Molly Ringwald, and then, because I am a true geek at heart, Carrie Fisher. So those are my girl crushes when I was younger. Soleil
Moon Frye is a good one, too. And another one that I would just throw out there? Remember that show Blossom from the 80s?
Oh, yeah.
What about Six? I always like the kind of more to like the sidekick ones, but I thought Six was Jenna Von Oy was her name, and I thought she was pretty good too. Okay, so my number one, speaking of kind of like the I guess the side ones, the one you wouldn't expect. So in 1985, Michael J. Fox made this huge movie, Back to the Future. But Yancy, I'm going to educate you on something. He also made a really small movie that year, and Gen Xers know exactly where I'm going to go with this, I hope. He made another movie that year, and it was a really small movie, and it was kind of a bomb at the box office, but those of us Gen Xers that know this movie, love this movie, it's called Teen Wolf. Okay, and so he made this movie called Teen Wolf, where he is a teenager and he turns into a wolf. Whenever he wants to.
I know of it, but I've never seen it.
Yeah, and he just turns, and it actually became like a TV series in like the 2000s. I think it was shot and produced in Canada, but anyway, neither here nor there. It was a 1985 movie with Michael J. Fox, and he turns into a wolf. And there was a girl in the movie that was kind of like, she hung around him and she kind of liked him, but he didn't pay attention to her. He wanted the really gorgeous blonde from high school, and he didn't want anything to do with this girl next door, that really liked him. And maybe because I was a nerd, and still am a nerd, and I kind of felt that way too, for the most part, when I was very, in 1985, I was 15. I just felt very uncomfortable with girls and all that kind of stuff. Maybe because I was in that same position, I related to this. But her character's name was Boof, and the actress's name was Susan Ursidy. And I had the hugest crush on Susan Ursity that I have carried to this day. And I think other Gen Xers out there will go, yes, Chris, I agree with you. I had the same crush. There was just something about her. She did do a lot of movies. She had a small part in Zapped, and she did a couple TV series, here and there, like just one-off, appearances, like in Charles in Charge and stuff like that. But it was Boof in Teen Wolf that kind of cemented her, I think, for an entire generation. And I hope to get some feedback from this. A whole generation of Gen Xers out there that realize that Susan Ursity was their major crush when they were a kid and they were growing up as a teenager, because she was mine. And she, I don't know. So I just had to mention her. So she's my number one. Okay.
How do you spell her name? I cannot find her on Google.
Okay, so her last name is Ursitti.
Ursity.
Ursity. Yep. Like I say,
she's beautiful.
She's
that cute,
gorgeous.
short, dark hair.
Oh, yeah. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And just the thing that got me about her, again, going back to what you said at the beginning of the show, Yancy, it's not about the people that are the most beautiful. It's the ones that have something different about them. And for her, it was just this vulnerability and she was the ultimate girl next door. She was just that girl next door, and she played it so perfectly in that role. She was the girl that was right beside him next door, literally, that he just didn't pay attention to until the end and realized, wow, this whole time she's been right there. And it was just a mixture of that and her looks and her vulnerability that tied it all together, and I think tied together a generation of Gen Xers that also think Susan Ursity was the number one crush of Gen X. So I'm going to say that, and I'm going to leave it at that. And it's time now to have
fun with Yancy.
Okay, so are you guys ready to do some trivia based on our topic tonight?
Yeah, let's do it.
So what I decided to do is I put together some trivia questions. I'm going to throw them out there. So I'll tell you what, you guys can be a tag team. Okay, so you guys can just, whenever you think you know the answer, maybe just blurt it out and just see if you know it. So this first one should be an easy one, especially for Danielle, because it's already come up once in this podcast. Okay, so this magazine, aimed primarily at teenage and preteen girls, started back in 1965. And throughout the years, the covers were mostly made up of like collages of headshots and stuff, and they featured many of the sort of heartthrobs of the day. So can you name this teen heartthrob magazine?
I wasted a lot of allowance on Teen Beat Magazine.
What was it called?
Teen Beat Magazine.
No,
Beat?
Close. No,
Are we talking about like 16 Mag or like Cosmo or something?
Oh, Teen Beat is so
there was
close.
Bop. There was.
I almost want to give it to you. It's not Teen Beat. Think of, you go to the zoo and there is an animal.
Tiger Beat?
Yes, that's it. Tiger Beat. Yes. Tiger Beat magazine.
There were a few of them. Oh.
There was a bunch of them. You're right. There was Teen Beat, Tiger Beat.
Is it still around?
Yes, it's still around as far as I know. I think it is, yeah. Okay, so tying into that one into the next question. So back in the late 70s and early 80s, this male, he was an actor and singer, really, and he was featured almost weekly. Every week, he would be on every teen magazine you can imagine on the cover. And I think he was the subject of just about every teenage girl's crush at one point or another during his reign that he had as a cover boy. And after years of dealing with substance abuse, he resurfaced years later in reality shows like Fear Factor and Celebrity Rehab with Dr. Drew. Yancy, Danielle, can you name the former child star and cover model who graced the magazine of every single magazine in the 70s and 80s?
No. Danielle, this is on you. Come on. This is totally you.
So think of a tree, and what's something that falls from a tree?
A leaf.
Yes, a leaf.
A pine cone.
A leaf. Does leaf help you at all, Danielle?
I can't remember his last name.
Leif Garrett.
Leif Garrett.
He was like the biggest of the big in those magazines back in the day. Okay, so back in the 90s. So this one I think is going to be right in your wheelhouse, Danielle. Okay, so this male actor had teenage girls' hearts all over America crushing on him for simply saying one, I wouldn't even say it's a word, just one sort of syllable, and that was, whoa. Who was he?
Joey Lawrence.
Yeah.
Who are these people?
Yancy's like, who's that? Okay, Scott Baio. Yancy, you probably know him as one of the very few celebrities out there that were willing to endorse Donald Trump. During his campaign for U.S. presidency in 2016. But however, it had been many years since Scott Baio was known to the general public. But believe it or not, Scott Baio was actually a huge crush of a ton of teenage girls right across the United States when he starred in Happy Days. Yancy, Danielle, can you name Scott Baio's character on Happy Days?
Do you know it, Yancy?
Honestly, Danielle, what do you think?
He later got his own show.
Chachi.
Yeah! And he later got
Jody loves Chachi.
I was going to say, is this a show? Because I remember watching, I think it was like Dodgeball, and Ben Stiller's character is like, Jody loves Chachi. Is that what that's from?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So I kind of know it, I guess.
Oh, man, it's just funny, these millennial references.
You at least know a reference.
Yeah, there you go.
That's close.
Okay, so one of the most popular crushes from the 90s was Winnie Cooper from the Wonder Years. Can you name the actress that played Winnie Cooper? Huge crush of
Danica McKellar?
Yes! Very good. Wow. Yes, that's it. All right. Okay, so one final one here. A little bit of a tough one. Okay, so as I'm sure you're aware, every single decade always has a famous pinup girl, right? In the 50s, it was Marilyn Monroe. The 80s, there was Heather Thomas. The 90s had Pamela Anderson. So can you name...
Bo Derek.
Can you name...
Sorry.
Close, I guess. Can you name the famous pinup girl of the 1970s? She had the highest selling poster of all time. And
Farrah Fawcett.
Oh my God! Yes!
Nice.
Oh, very good.
Yes.
Oh, and what was the?
Honestly, as an aside, obviously Farrah Fawcett was a very, very gorgeous woman.
Right.
I feel so bad for her because, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't she die the same day as Michael Jackson?
Yes.
And his death completely overshadowed hers, and she had a very, very illustrious career for a long time. And I just remember watching the news, and it was like, oh, MJ. Oh yeah, by the way, Farrah Fawcett died today too. I was like, oh, it sucks to die regardless, but man, that was kind of sad that she had to kind of share that day with one of the most famous people of all time. But
yeah, I remember having the same reaction because her death was announced first and then MJ. And it was one of those times where you see somebody kind of famous and you get excited about it, and then you see somebody really famous behind them and you just go right past. And that's kind of what her death was like.
Gone. Exactly. But
by the way, this is kind of random too, but I'm a huge fan of that feathered look that the women of the 60s and 70s did with their hair. I think that's so beautiful, and it's one trend that I wish would come back today. I think it's just absolutely beautiful.
And Farrah Fawcett was the queen of that. Her hair but her hair was not the star of that poster. Let me tell you, there was one other thing to that poster that was a little bit more famous, but she was really known for that feathered
One other thing?
I think there was just one that you could see. That was noticeable. It was a little cold in the studio that day. Let's just say that. So, hey, if you want to reach us on Twitter, you can reach us at Yancy Eaton or at C. McBrien. And, of course, you can reach Danielle Salinger at Mrs. D. Salinger on Twitter. That's MRS D. Salinger. Danielle, thank you very much for joining us today. This has been great.
Thank you, guys. I had a great time. This is like stepping into your favorite show, and really great to be involved.
Oh, that was a lot of fun having you. So, Yancy, we're going to flip back to our normal sort of format for next week. So, I'm going to have to watch a movie between now and next week. Do you have something lined up for me?
I don't. I actually thought it was your week to pick a movie, but you're right.
No, because we did Revenge of the Nerds last week. So I hate to put you on the spot, but if you want to throw a movie at me, and I'll watch it between now and next week, and then we'll come back next week and discuss your millennial film, and then I'll send you back to the 80s again after that. So do you have anything in mind that you'd like to watch, or anything just off the top of your head that you want me to watch?
You know what? I'm going to throw something at you. It's completely off the beaten path of sci-fi films that you're.
Oh,
I know
no,
you're
it's another sci-fi film. I can't believe it.
No, it's not. It's actually an animated film, and in my personal opinion, I think it's one of the greatest films of all time. It came out in 1994, and it was overshadowed simply because Forrest Gump also came out in the same year. But it's actually The Lion King. For the first time ever, Chris, we're going to talk about an animated movie on this podcast.
And you want to know something? And okay, so don't judge me on this. I know this is really bad. Don't judge me on this. I have never seen The Lion King.
Oh my God.
I know. Isn't that
Danielle,
bad?
Oh my God. Oh, you hear this?
I know. I'm obviously familiar with it and the songs and everything, but I've never seen it.
I've seen it enough, probably for all three of us. Just having an almost 7-year-old at home. As a matter of fact, if you guys need a guest for the show, I'm sure my daughter would love to come in. But
she has some thoughts.
She has lots and lots of thoughts. She sleeps every night with Simba, a little Simba plushie. So we took her to Disneyland a few months ago, and that was the one thing that she really wanted. She loves this movie. So hopefully you'll have a lot of fun watching that, Chris.
So the film has obviously endured over the years, and it's had a lot of lasting power. And so I'll absolutely watch it for next week. That's a good one. Yancy, I like that one. That's a good one. I don't know, is it qualify as a millennial film because it was in '94? I guess kind of. It's on the cusp, right? So
I was 6 years old whenever it came out.
So it's perfect. So. No, I'll watch it for next week. We'll come back. We'll talk about Lion King. It's all good. Until then, this is Chris McBrien for Yancy Eaton saying thanks for listening to Pop Goes Your World, the pop culture podcast for the generations.
Thank you for listening to the Pop Goes Your World podcast. Continue the conversation on Twitter @CMcBrien or @Yancy Eaton. Please consider leaving a review for the podcast on iTunes or wherever you download and listen to the show.